Hey guys, it's Daniel or Dan J, and today I'm going to be reviewing my endocrine rotation as an F1 doctor in the UK. So if you didn't know, I am a foundation year 1 doctor, which is basically the bottom level of doctoring. Then you go to FY2, then you go into core training of whatever you want, and then specialty training, then you're consultant, and those are the levels. And my first rotation of the year was endocrinology. Now, if you know anything about endocrinology, you could probably wonder what you could possibly see day to day in a hospital that would require an endocrine input. I think I was sort of the same when starting because I just didn't know much about it. I never done endocrine as a block in university, or maybe I did for a week, but all we did was clinics and none of it was to do with ward work. I know it was a specialty that you could do in 5th year last year, but I didn't do it. I did gastroenterology instead, which is quite straightforward. You basically just see liver stuff and maybe like IBDs and like bowel stuff. It was split that way. Endocrinology was a very mixed bag. So I'm just first going to talk you through a typical day. So basically we'd get there at 8 a.m, we get started, basically prepare the notes, the list of the patients on the wards in each bay, and we'd basically split the work based on how many people were there. We also had an outliers team as well, so usually 1 or 2 people would go with another consultant to the outliers team, and then the rest would split, usually enough for 1 bay each, would split that, and that would be the workload for the day, and you just get started prepping the notes, ready for the consultant to come and see the patient. So at the start we do the ward round with the consultant of the week, as I was saying. So that consultant would see 2 bays a day, so maybe bay 1 and 2, then bay 3 and 4, then 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and then all of them on a Friday. And for the people who weren't seeing patients with a consultant, you'd likely see the patients with the reg or maybe an IMT. But as we got further along into the rotation, you might see some patients on your own and then report back to the consultant, and that would basically be how you'd make a plan or report back to the reg, depending on who was there and who was watching over that bay. So prepping notes is a key part of every foundation doctor's day, and most doctors, until you become a reg, to be honest, it seems, you're prepping the notes, you're getting ready for the ward round. That's what you do basically. And it doesn't really seem very doctory, but it's an important part of the day and it helps you to get to know the patient. So you'd flick through, see when they were clerked in, see what issues they came in with, see where they were, look at their bloods, look at their obs, and just present it ready for a way that the consultant could kind of understand the story for themselves as well. And then of course, in the times when I would see patients by myself, I'd be able to get started with seeing any new issues with the patients, starting a management plan, getting that enacted as well, ordering scans, getting tests done, and then just reporting back to the consultant just to see if there was anything else that needed to be done or if I was along the right track basically, which was much more of the doctor side that I expected in medical school. Obviously, as you get later on into medical school, you will learn that you do a lot of admin for the first few hours of the morning, and then you do the jobs, doctory stuff in the afternoon. And that doesn't matter what rotation you're on, so it's all the same. And then we'd have a board round at 11 a.m, and that would basically be a multidisciplinary team meeting. So the doctors, the nurse in charge, the physios, the discharge coordinators, all the people who were part of the patient's care would come to this board round just to hear what the next steps in the treatment plan were, to kind of plan where they would go next, whether they needed support at home or whether they needed to go to a care home, all these things. And it was a pretty good meeting, a good way to learn about the social side of the patients as well, which you do learn through like maybe 3 lectures a year, the social side of patients, but it's more focused around how GPs can help their patients that way, because hospital doctors, there's people hired for that. So we do have the physios and the occupational therapists and the discharge coordinators who sort of deal with that side of things, of where the patient will go after and what support they'll need. But it's always good to learn and sort of know how to best support your patients, even if it's not your main role. And like I said, you just crack through the jobs you created from the ward round in the afternoon. So the ward round would finish usually around 12ish, and then you might have lunch and then start the jobs. And most days the jobs were okay for me anyways. Sometimes there'd be patients who would be a bit more unwell, which meant that you would have to do jobs later on in the afternoon that you weren't planning for, that you hadn't written down from the ward round, and it would be more of an acute presentation, which was more common on our ward because it was more acute, but it wasn't a consistent thing and it wasn't like we were staying late every day. And then if you were working an on-call day, after 5 o'clock, you would be covering 6 medical wards. So that would be the endocrine, the gastro, resp, MAU, and the other sort of MAU wards. There was a neurology ward as well that you'd cover. But essentially for most of those 3 hours, you would just be chasing bloods, chasing scans, making sure those things are okay. And if anything acute came from them, you enacted on that and you did something about it, raised it to a senior, whatever. Or you might be asked to prescribe some pain medication, was a very common one, or fluids for people who might not be drinking or something like that. And maybe 1 or 2 times during each shift, you might have to go and review an acutely unwell patient, in which you just have to kind of do an A to E assessment, think about the management, and then think about whether you need more senior support to help step up their treatment, or whether you think that you can manage it for now and just take some observations and maybe mention it to a senior later on, depending on how acutely unwell the patient is. And I think those on-call times definitely make you feel more like you're doing the doctor work, the acute patient, where you're sort of handling that patient as well. And that was the same when we had some medical take shifts. So essentially you'd spend 12 hours of the day just clerking in patients. You probably see 3 or 4 people and just take a detailed history from them, the entire side, then start a management plan. And then after some time, when a consultant was free, they would come and see the patient with you as well and sort of affirm your management plan or maybe completely change it. It depends. There were some patients where I knew straight away this is what was going to happen and that would be the plan, and the consultant would say exactly the same with just a few added extras. Or there might be a few times where I didn't really know what was going on with the patient, where the consultant might just give a completely different plan, but it would sort of help me to learn how to next manage that patient if I had to do it on my own. And of course, I guess that's the way it goes. As you progress through these tiers, you're sort of going to become better equipped to deal with things on your own. Now, what do we really see? We had a lot of patients who might be stable, but there were also patients who were on the more unstable side, so more volatile, more that could happen in that afternoon and cause you to have to stay behind to help deal with the patient and deal with their situation, because sometimes it's just easier for you to deal with that than handing it over to the on-call team. We did get a lot of step downs from ITU, which can be peak, because it basically means these people were just on the most intensive therapy there was, and now they've been stepped down because ITU feel they don't need any organ support, but now they're on your caseload and you need to be able to deal with them properly and just make sure they don't end up back in ITU. And we had a lot of diabetic patients, so it'd literally be like, oh, you have diabetes and you have this other condition that's coming through, go to the endocrine ward. And essentially, that I guess that might make sense, but I think because there's so much of endocrinology, which usually doesn't require hospitalization unless you're acutely unwell, it kind of makes sense that we get the diabetic patients who might have another condition, because when you're ill, your diabetic control also gets worse as well. So we usually had 7 patients each, so a bay each was 6 patients in a bay plus 1 side room, but sometimes you have to be on the outliers team, which could have anywhere between 10 and 20 patients. And usually when it had more, we'd get more support. So there'd be 2 people on there, but when there was less, it would just be 1 person on there, which worked quite well, I think. And I think there were so many different presentations just because endocrine ends up being a general medicine ward, where obviously you can have some diabetic patients, but a lot of the time it is just random presentations. And just because we have space and we are a medicine ward for acute medicine, you kind of get those sorts of patients there. In terms of senior support, I'd say we were pretty well staffed and it was pretty good. The hierarchies and the rankings, it just helped. There was obviously mostly F1s doing the jobs, with some medical nurse practitioners as well. There was an F2, an IMT, and Regis there was one Reg who was always there pretty much, and there was other Regis who'd come, who were usually doing clinics, but would also be on the wards 1 or 2 days a week, which helped with the senior support. The consultants were really easy to contact. Great team overall in terms of senior support. We also got a lot of learning in. So one of the things about F1 is you get weekly teaching as part of your core teaching, because you have to get 30 hours of teaching in F1 to be able to get signed off. And of course we had that time. There was rarely times where we would miss that teaching. I never missed the F1 core teaching when it was on, because it's meant to be a protected time. So you're meant to not have to miss it unless there is literally a medical emergency going on. Like, you should be staffed well enough so that the F1s can go. And I'd say we were staffed well enough. But we also had weekly teaching, which was done by the consultants and also by the juniors as well. So every one of the juniors would have a week in which they would have to present something, basically. And I did my presentation on the red eye. It was pretty fun. It's a nice way to learn as well. And yeah, it just adds to the non-core hours, which you also have to get. So 30 hours of core, 30 hours of non-core. And it just worked well, and it was good for learning and good for portfolio. In terms of portfolio as well, I definitely upped my skills in taking bloods and cannulas, not only because a lot of it falls on you. If the phlebotomist doesn't come and the nurses aren't free to help you take bloods, then it's on you. So you have a bunch of different patients. You're first starting out as an F1, and it just teaches you how to hone in your skills of blood taking and doing cannulas, just because the effort it takes to get someone else to do those bloods when you need them to do the next job in the set kind of forces you to get better at doing it. And when you do it so often, you of course get better. And of course, with more unwell patients, diabetic patients who might have vasculopathies, which mean that they have terrible veins, you're going to get those bloods and you're going to try. And over the days, you're going to try on that same patient over and over again, and you're just going to learn how to be better at doing so. And I think it really helped for that. I think it also helped with escalation as well. So when I spoke to people, they would be like they were stuck on the ward that I was stuck on for a lot of the time that they did their on-call shifts. Whereas for me, I felt like I was able to deal with the issues that might come from that ward more easily because it was my day-to-day job. So being able to escalate things, or being able to know when things were something that I would have to go over and review, which can take a lot more time than giving instructions over the phone and then reviewing the patient later. I think those things get taught to you more easily when your ward has more acutely unwell patients just generally, and you know how to deal with them day to day when you do have senior support just next to you in the office or next to you on the ward. So I said we dealt with a random range of conditions, but what did we see often? We saw DKAs, diabetic feet, osteomyelitis, pneumonias, just a lot of diabetic presentations were definitely there. So things that are common, DKA, which actually isn't all that common, but it'd be there. Osteomyelitis is common in diabetic people, and diabetic neuropathy, so ulcers, that obviously can lead to osteomyelitis as well. You see a lot of pressure ulcers and that sort of thing that needed dealing with, but also, yeah, the general medicine stuff like pneumonias, UTIs, all of that, a wide range of patients. Just because of it being an endocrine ward, anything can end up there. And I think those differing cases definitely helped with being able to manage things medically and just knowing what to do next, reading through the folders and seeing what happened in the acute phase and then seeing how they were dealt with during their ward phase is very good for learning. So overall, I think I would give this rotation a 7 out of 10. It was very good, it was a very good start, and it was a nice way to learn as well. Obviously I don't want to do acute medicine, I want to do surgery, so obviously you didn't get that, but I think everything else kind of culminated into it being a good place and a good start to learn with. And now I'm on general surgery, I can definitely feel the load of work has decreased, maybe because I'm more experienced now, but also because there was a high load of work when I was on endocrine as well, and I think acute medicine generally just has a high load of work. That was endocrine, and I guess sometime in April I will review my general surgery rotation. But if you do have any questions about the endocrine rotation, just let me know down in the comment section below. And yeah, if you're new around here, hit subscribe, put a thumbs up on this video if you did enjoy it, and as ever, it's been a pleasure, and I'll talk to you in the next video.